I have been binging this new Shōgun show. First of all, let me say, it is indeed a very good show. It really makes you go into a deep dive in Japanese culture in the early 1600s. Now, I cannot speak as to the historical accuracy of it, because I'm not that familiar with Japanese history, and I also cannot speak for how faithful it is to the novel, because I haven't read it. I can, however, speak in relation to an element of this show, namely about hygiene and bathing habits. It is an element which of course they had to include because Hollywood or whoever made the show must try and employ some shock value for the audience. And if it's not gore or some kind of a taboo sexual element, what better shock value to come up with than people in Tudor England being unbathing, sweat-smelling morons? I am referring to the scene where our English guy protagonist, kind of being visibly dirty, is being offered to bathe in a Japanese household, and he refuses. At which the Japanese kind of scold and wonder. And the idea that we're meant to get out of this is, of course, that the Japanese had far superior understanding of personal hygiene than the English at the time. So, because I'm a Tudor history nerd, albeit just an armchair historian, I feel competent enough to give my 2 cents on that. Well then, was this idea that the scene was trying to present generally accurate? Was it true that during the Tudor period the English were way grosser than the Japanese? Well, kind of yes, but also kind of no. This show wants us to think that the English had no hygiene at all, which just wasn't the case. If we look at the exchange between the protagonist and the Japanese, in short it goes like this. You want to take a bath? No, I took a bath in the village. But that was days ago. So you want me to take a second bath in a week? Are you crazy? I'm gonna get the flux. Which FYI was the old word for dysentery. So people who are not familiar with medicine in Tudor England will hear this and basically have the same reaction as the Japanese did. What the hell is this guy talking about? Is he insane? Did they really wash themselves just once a week in England? Did they walk around smelling like shit? And the short answer is no, they didn't. When it came to bathing and being clean, Tudor England didn't have fewer hygienic practices than Japan, they just had ones that were different, and which were based on the prevailing medical theory at the time, which was the miasma theory. This theory was based on, I think, Aristotle, and the general idea was that sicknesses were airborne and were identifiable by bad smells, so whatever smells nice is good for your health, and whatever smells bad is dangerous, and you have to avoid it. And you avoid it, first of all, by staying away from anything looking or smelling dirty, and second of all, by keeping the pores on your skin closed off, because they believed that the bad-smelling airborne illness could contaminate you by entering your body through the skin pores. And how do you keep your skin pores closed? You guessed it, by avoiding water, and especially hot water. People in Tudor England were generally wary of water, as not only did it supposedly open your skin pores and let sicknesses inside you, but it was also perceived as something that was generally dirty, as in stale swamp waters or waters people threw their trash and sewage in, which, by the way, is why when people were thirsty, they generally drank ale instead of water. So imagine the number of drunks in comparison to nowadays. Anyway, did all this, them avoiding water baths, did all of this mean they just went around filthy and smelling like shit? No, because they used dry methods of keeping clean. For example, scrubbing down one's entire body with a piece of linen, which is of course fabric that's kind of coarse and it has absorption qualities, which means that when you rub yourself down with it properly, it gets rid of dirt, sweat, and dead skin, which is the same thing a water bath is supposed to do. And for the hair, dry cleaning too. No water or anything, but just a very fine comb with such fine teeth that when you brush your hair, it gets rid of dirt, oil, lice, and whatever other beauties you might have in your wonderful 16th century hair. And just like with the linen for the body, you brush your hair properly and daily in order to keep it very clean. Combine that with changing clothes daily and doing proper laundry, which they did, and they generally went around looking very clean, to the point where actually, at the time, it was perceived as a very bad thing for someone to walk around smelly and disgusting. People in Tudor England, as people nowadays, and as people in all ages of history, hated being filthy and smelly, and they avoided it as much as possible. Now, of course, one might argue that even with their personal hygiene habits, they still must have smelled as something we modern people would perceive as kind of unpleasant, because they didn't have shampoos and deodorants and whatever, and I can see where they're coming from. If we could go back in time and take a sniff at a supposedly clean Tudor person, they'd most likely have what we'd perceive as a weird / a little bit natural kind of odor, and it's not certain whether it'd be easily defined as a pleasant one or not. But the point I'm trying to make is, even in contrast to our modern perceptions of personal hygiene, the Tudors were not filthy slobs as Shōgun would have us believe. The scene might be kind of accurate in terms of first-glance perceptions and potential reactions from people from different cultures, but the impression the scene is trying to impose on the viewer is generally wrong to have. This is my problem with historical shows employing shock value, because when it comes to human history and the way people absorb it, it should not be taken with shock. It should be taken in the manner of a cool and collected mind, capable of perceiving people from across the ages, not with judgment, but with the knowledge that we are all people of our own times, and we cannot be held responsible for that by people who are not from our times, especially when we're dead. When analyzing history, the least productive thing we can do is judge and scold the departed. Have a look at their life and world, knowing that both the person and their world is now gone, and take conclusions from it to the betterment of our present condition. And I know this is never going to happen in a show because it's about viewership and not historical teaching, but whatever.